Those were the last words that I yelled at my dad before my parents separated for the final time. I was 14 years old at the time. 14. My parents fighting was getting worse and worse. And frankly, my brothers and I couldn't take it. I remember looking out my bedroom door, my brother right across the hall from where my room was. And he's looking at me, his eyes begging me, begging somebody to intervene, make it stop, make the conflict stop. We were squarely right in the middle of our parents' dispute. So like the nuclear bomb, my words decimated my nuclear family. It took me about 25 years to unpack that trauma. I think I kind of buried it and forgot about it. Separating parents hurt their kids. They do it unintentionally most of the time. But what I'm going to suggest is that with a gentle nudge, we can help them. By raising your hands, how many people are products of a separated family? Your parents separated. How many people have separated? How many people know somebody in their organization or friend or family member who has separated and gone through a nasty separation? I didn't get everyone to keep their hands up, but I guarantee by the end of all of that, everybody's hands were up. Now, my passion for this comes from almost 15 years as a divorce attorney, where I help people trying to get through their separation. And the one thing that I've noticed is that parents continue to put their kids in the middle of this conflict. They hurt their kids. And frankly, I'm sick of it. And so what I'm going to discuss today is essentially illustrate how we hurt our kids. I'm going to dive into why we hurt our kids. And again, as I've mentioned, I don't think most of us do it intentionally. And then I'm going to suggest ways that we can help nudge, either a self-nudge for ourselves if we're going through it, or nudge the people that are close to us so that they don't harm these innocent casualties, their kids. Now, I became a lawyer in around 2010. I separated from my son's mom about a year earlier. And I thought that's what got me into being a divorce attorney. Our separation was acrimonious, high conflict. It didn't need to be. Most of them don't need to be. Ours was pretty high conflict. I was probably a big reason for that. But around 3 to 6 months in, my son's mom, my son Parker, his mom Susie, repartners. I had a hard time with that. And it wasn't so much the emotional connection with her, but it was the fact that my little boy, 3 years old, it seemed like this new dude, we'll call him Chris, he got to spend infinite time with my son, whereas I had to work tooth and nail for every minute I got. And so I had an idea. This is Chris. I decided in between teaching my 2.5-year-old the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, I'm going to teach him Chris douchebag. Chris douchebag. And I told my friends about it. We got a good laugh. There's some chuckles here about it. Now, here's what I didn't know, though. So I didn't know if Chris had anger issues. I didn't know if he had drug or alcohol issues. I didn't know if he had alone time with my son. I didn't know that when my son would call Chris a douchebag when no one was there, he'd get hit. Now, thank God that never happened. And actually, Chris turned out to be a fairly decent guy. And to the best of my knowledge, Parker never said anything about that. Thank God. But that illustrates that I'm a divorce lawyer at that time, or turning into one. And I didn't know better, or at least I didn't channel that maturity. And I'm going to suggest, from observing all of the divorces I've observed since, most people don't. Now, I mentioned that it's only recently that I dove into the trauma. Those of you in the EO, you'll recognize this. This is just one I pulled off the internet. It's nobody in here, no form confidential. But this is called the lifeline. So most of us would have done that. It's an exercise where essentially we take our life, earliest memory, and draw lines from positive experiences to negative experiences. So myself and my forum mates did that together. And as I'm writing it, that's where I remembered this event when I was 14. And it triggered me. It started, I couldn't help but well up with tears as I was typing about it or thinking about it. I cried when I told my forum mates about it. It was clearly a point of trauma for me. So I realized I've got to dive into this deeper. I've got to explore it. I've got to, I can't just bury it. That's what older generations used to do. So I set up interviews with my parents. Start there. And I've got a pretty good relationship with both of them now. So first up, I sat down with my dad. And we spoke. And the one thing that was bizarre with both of the conversations was how negative they still were to one another. They still carried this resentment. They carried a hatred, blame. And we're talking a quarter century later. This is over 25 years later. And they've harbored that. But that was an aside. I'm talking through their experience, asking how it was. So finally I get to the question I've been burning to ask my dad. I'm like, Dad, recently I dove into this, and what was going through your mind when me at 14 years old came down and yelled at you to get out? Paused, stared me straight in the eye, said he had no recollection of that ever happening. Now, my dad drank a lot, so he was probably drunk that night. It was often the source of my parents fighting, so I figured that must have been it. He woke up with a hangover, barely a memory of what happened the night before. So finished up talking to him about that stuff, and then it was my mom's turn a few days later. Talking to my mom about things. Now, she actually still has her divorce file in a box. That's an entire other story where I got to dive through my own parents' divorce and read it as a divorce attorney. That was wild. I'll be writing a book on that one. But so I'm asking her the exact same questions for the most part, asking her experience. Like I said, same blaming, same anger, same resentments. And then I ask her the question, and I figure here's a woman with an iron vault for a memory. She'll point out every time I left a dirty dish in the sink. Mom, what was going through your mind when I came down and yelled that at Dad? She didn't remember. So now this is my rock. This is somebody who's got it together. She has no recollection of this event. My mind blows. And so at this point, I'm thinking, Mom can't be wrong. I made this shit up. I was such a kid in turmoil that I created this event. I manufactured, I went insane. I hallucinated. And I remembered I have a witness. So I called my brother, like, dude, help me out here. Mom and Dad, I told them about this thing where I yelled at Dad. I was 14. Do you remember that? Like, yeah, man, you definitely did it. I remember it like it was yesterday. Whew. Vindicated. At least I wasn't the crazy one. But it made me think, how could they not have realized this? So I've gone through, earlier I explained how we hurt our kids. We hurt them by not recognizing what we're doing, by me not recognizing the words I was teaching Parker, by my parents not seeing me, not being present for that. That's how we do it, but why do we do it? So at the same time as I'm exploring this, I'm also reading a lot of psychology books. And so I'm going to, we'll play a quick video. If you've seen it, a lot of you in this room will have seen it. So don't ruin it for those who haven't. Just watch along. It's only about a minute and a half.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted. It is available for use in talks,
So some of you will have said, yeah, I saw the gorilla. The ones that didn't, you're in good company. 83% of radiologists who saw this for the first time didn't see the gorilla. They were busy actually focusing on what they were told to focus on, basketball passes. And so that really got me thinking. The research from Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons was they wrote a book on it. All of it was based on a book by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did a lot of the research with Daniel Kahneman. He died before the book. But Kahneman won the Nobel Peace Prize for behavioral economics by discovering that humans aren't rational. We generally do not tap into our rational brain. We have two systems of thinking. System one, the fast thinking, is more instinctive. It's survival, in survival mode. So the second system, which we rarely access, is slower thinking and is more methodical and is rational, is more rational. And so as I'm getting through all this, I'm realizing that through my parents fighting, I was a gorilla. So, which again was a eureka moment for me, in that my parents were so busy counting the basketball passes, so busy focusing on that stuff, they didn't see me. That's why they don't remember this incident. That's why I didn't realize the harm I was potentially causing my son. That's why my clients don't realize the harm they're causing their kids. So we know the how, we know the why. Parents don't intend to do this. Well, moving forward on the psychology train, two other academics, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, wrote a book called Nudge. The principle of the book is that there was choice architecture, and that by simple nudges we could help steer people's decision making. Because again, we're not rational, so let's nudge them to rational decisions. And an example of that, a good example of that they use is organ donation. Organ donation in opt-out states or countries is way higher than ones where you have to opt in. If you have to check a box not to be an organ donor, way higher rates. And there's a good example of that in the news. An expert somewhere probably said it. No, this was actual facts, where Ontario and Nunavut put a checkbox on the tax returns saying, check here if you want to donate your organs. by doing that, 2.5 million more organ donors in Canada. Just that instance, that's choice architecture. Other examples include schools, school cafeterias. They'll put healthy foods in one area and unhealthy foods in another. And depending where that goes, you steer the choice of kids. So what I propose is that we need to start working together to start nudging parents in a different direction. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I mentioned before the story with my son's mom and her partner and my son. I was clearly the villain in that story, but thankfully I came to my senses at some point, and I realized I needed a reframe. I needed a self-nudge. My self-nudge was my son's mom was not going to be my ex-wife. We were married, we are divorced, but by calling her my ex-wife, it tethers us to that negative thing, which is a failed relationship. By calling her my son's mom, it anchors us to something beautiful, our beautiful baby boy that we created. That's the one thing that keeps us together. And so that's one nudge I've started imparting on my clients. And they've reported not only great results in how they're treated by the other parent, but just themselves. That, like I said, it's a self-nudge. And other nudges can include pushing. As a divorce lawyer, I have to have the disclaimer that you should always know your legal rights, and that's important. However, the first nudge that most people provide to separating friends, family members, whatever the case might be, go to a lawyer. You need a good attorney to help you out through this. The reality is, legal issues when you're going through a separation or a divorce are a sliver of the issues that you're actually facing. They're the tip of the iceberg. All of the major issues are rooted beneath the surface. Things like trust, communication, infidelity, mental health, physical health, finances. The list goes on and on. Those are the things that people should be working on before going to a lawyer. There's a New York attorney, he's been on several podcasts, named James Sexton, has a book called If You're in My Office, It's Already Too Late. That's true. Because the reality is, as a divorce lawyer, if you're coming to me and your relationship is hanging on by a thread, I have one tool in my tool belt. And it's not going to help. It's not going to help the kids. It's not going to help the parties. So that's my message. Again, anybody who encounters someone dealing with separation or divorce, please provide that nudge to help them. And if not for them, for the defenseless kids.